Afghanistan, a country which is sometimes referred to as the graveyard of empires. The idea being that a great state comes to conquer, has a pretty difficult time of it, and the debacles there lead to the eventual collapse of said state's empire. But this raises the question of just how true this is. Is Afghanistan really the graveyard of empires? So to begin, the idea of there being a state called Afghanistan is a new one. The area and many parts of it had changed hands many times in the past millennia. The Persians, the Macedonians, the Umayyad Caliphate, the Mongols and their successors were all able to hold and control at least some of the territories of what is now Afghanistan, and many did so for a long time. And so this would suggest that Afghanistan isn't really the graveyard of empires, right? Well, kind of. By the turn of the 19th century, an independent Afghan state existed and included much of what's now modern-day Pakistan. So what changed and how did Afghanistan get its reputation? Well, as of 1835, it looked like this, having lost some territory to the Sikh Empire. Also at this point, the British were strengthening their grip on India. And for them, Afghanistan appeared to be a crisis waiting to happen, since it could be used by the ever-expanding Russian Empire as a route to invade India. And as such, the British opted to befriend the Emir of Afghanistan. Just kidding, they invaded and tried to replace him with his ousted predecessor, who they felt would be much nicer to them. The British were confident that this would be a somewhat quick and easy war, but fun fact, no. At first, things went well. However, things turned sour pretty quickly, mostly because of the geography of Afghanistan and also the hostility of the people there to outside rule. And eventually, holding Afghan territory became too costly, and so the British opted to leave Kabul, which led to the infamous 1842 retreat. As you'll know, the British Empire didn't collapse in the wake of this loss, and so naturally Afghanistan did not develop a reputation of wrecking empires at this point. This is doubly true when you consider the fact that in 1878 Britain invaded again, and this time they succeeded and established a puppet leader there to keep the Russians away from India. And after this, Afghanistan was, for the most part, a peaceful place, and it wasn't invaded again until the 1970s, this time by the Soviet Union. In 1978, the Afghan government was overthrown by a communist coup with the backing of the USSR. It began to centralize power and implement broad-sweeping reforms which, to put it mildly, were not popular. Armed insurrection began with the backing of the Western powers, and the USSR intervened in 1979 to prop up the communist government there. At first, things went well, and the major cities and the routes between them were secured quickly. But a guerrilla war took hold, and the Soviets lacked the ability to put an end to the Mujahideen's fight against them. And so, after 10 years of increasing costs in terms of money and lives, Mikhail Gorbachev called for the withdrawal of Soviet troops. This was nothing short of an international humiliation for the USSR, and as you'll know, over 2 years later, the USSR had fully collapsed. And it was this that gave Afghanistan its reputation of being the graveyard of empires. But is this a fair assessment? Well, no. Afghanistan being the place that empires go to die is based almost exclusively upon Britain's troubles there the first time it invaded, and also the USSR's collapse shortly after its withdrawal from there in 1989, to which the war in Afghanistan only played a very small part. To conclude, Afghanistan is simply not the graveyard of empires. Historically, it's been fairly easy to conquer and has been conquered many times, although holding on to it is another matter entirely.